Hi, I'm Aurelia. Last week I walked into a bank and asked to withdraw $100. 100. Lunch money compared to what some people breathe in a morning. My own sister, Sabine, the branch manager, laughed, tilted her chin like a queen in a snow-white suit and said, "We don't serve beggars here." She didn't murmur it. She rang it like a bell so the whole marble lobby could hear. Faces lifted. Phones lowered. It felt like someone had opened a freezer inside my ribs. But what they didn't know, I had the authority to empty the entire institution with a single breath. And I would. But the truest withdrawal wouldn't be cash. It would be my silence. My name. My loyalty. Ever been betrayed so quietly you start to believe it must be your fault, until the truth walks in and the room drops 20 degrees? Keep watching. What happened next made her knees meet the tile. Before we dive in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop a comment. I read everyone. The cold came early to Cincinnati. Leaves clung like stubborn thoughts along 4th Street. The river wind scraped frost into glitter on the sidewalks. I pulled my scarf tighter, deep wine red, soft as a secret. I'd bought it at a street fair years ago, on a day I dared to be proud of simply existing. Back then, $20 felt like defiance. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the downtown Crescent Bank branch, not because I had stacks to pull, but because Mrs. Hutchkins down the hall had finally whispered what pride wouldn't let her say. Could I spot her grocery money till Friday? I'd watched her hands tremble opening an empty fridge, watched her smile too brightly while skipping dinner. $100 could keep the pantry from echoing. That was enough. Inside. Eucalyptus, lacquered wood, and the antiseptic gleam of money behaving itself. Everyone looked like they belonged. The floor shimmered. I wore thrifted denim, hems restitched twice, and a coat I'd mended by lamplight. Still I stood straight. The line inched. Glances slid over me, curious, calculating the way people look when they can't decide if you're lost or just poor. Then the voice. Smooth. Polished. Performed. Well, isn't this a surprise? It slithered to my ear before I turned. Of course she wore winter white. Sabine. Heels like punctuation, smile glued on like it had been ironed. A junior teller trailed behind her, nerves printed on her face. "Aurelia," she cooed, loud enough for the lobby. "Still using this branch, are we?" I looked only at her. Same lacquered lips. Same smug geometry to the jaw. Sabine never needed volume to make a scene. She radiated disruption. "You know," she leaned in, voice sugar over glass, "we've updated our client tiers. We don't really serve walk-ins anymore." Then louder, crisp enough to cut. "Especially not beggars." A man in navy looked up. An older woman by the window stilled. The word cracked across the marble like a ruler on bone. Sabine smiled wider, charity masquerading as cruelty. "You do understand, don't you?" I nodded once. Not agreement. A tactic. I'd learned long ago. Sometimes silence detonates louder than a shout. My fingers brushed the scarf. The weave felt familiar, like an old promise. I stepped out of line. My boots made no sound on the tile. I walked past Sabine without a syllable. Outside, the cold kissed my face with mercy. My reflection clung for a second in the gleaming door. Head high, eyes steady. I didn't cry. Not anymore. That night I peeled off my coat and scarf in my apartment. Peppermint tea and old books, my favorite kind of peace. The scarf lay on the table like a standard, folded once, then again. My hand rested there. Then I fished the old laptop from under the couch cushion. It stuttered awake, loyal as ever. Passphrase. Ping. One encrypted message right on cue. I read it twice. Closed the lid. My pulse didn't race. Slowed into purpose. I lifted the scarf. The last time I wore it as armor was years ago, after Sabine called me a soft-spoken parasite at a Christmas party I hadn't been invited to. Outside in the snow, buttoning my coat with numb fingers, I whispered to myself, "One day they'll see." Tonight I didn't whisper. I dialed a number no one in my family knew existed. "Hey," I said when the line clicked. "It's Aurelia. I need a favor." I didn't take Sabine's calls that night. She didn't make any. She never dirted her hands with the aftermath. But I let myself imagine her face if she knew I still had access to the one person who could shut her entire branch down by blinking. By the time the late November air sealed the city in stillness, I'd climbed the narrow stairs to my second-floor walk-up, hung the wine-colored scarf by the door, and turned on the only light that didn't buzz. The radiator hummed. I brewed tea I barely drank. Sat at the small dining table that moonlighted as my command center. The laptop came to me like an accomplice. 3 locks. First, fingerprint. Then a rotating 6-digit code punched through a satellite relay. Finally, a phrase typed slow. Nightlark keeps score. The screen stayed black long enough to test my faith, then bloomed into an interface almost no one on Earth had clearance to see. My name wasn't on it. Intentionally. In another life or the secret hallway of this one, I helped architect a security protocol so tight it made headlines that never mentioned us. Back then I went by N. Lark. An alias born from an inside joke, and a bird I'd once nursed back to health on a foster farm in Arizona. A soft ping. A message from K. You're finally ready. I stared at the cursor until my breath found a new rhythm. It's time, I typed. He didn't ask why. The system we'd built rewarded clean movement. No chatter. No crumbs. When I walked away from my family, it wasn't shame. It was strategy. Every time I said I had plans that I wouldn't drift, they laughed. You? My father once scoffed, flicking my resume onto the table without reading it. You'll be lucky if a gas station lets you squeegee. Sabine was worse. Aim lower, Aurelia. She'd purred when I mentioned a fintech internship. The world doesn't owe you a desk. So I vanished. Not to disappear. To build where they couldn't reach. Kay and I registered the fund through 5 countries, each a legal maze. We named it CipherArk 7. I designed the system architecture and the trust lattice. He raised the initial capital. By the end of year 2, I held the majority stake. Nested behind fiduciary matryoshkas no accountant could thread without this terminal. And Sabine's bank? They'd been petitioning CipherArk Holdings as a silent partner for years. They finally won a portion of our liquidity last quarter. I reviewed the onboarding myself, watched her signature bloom on the digital paperwork, blissfully unaware whose shadow she was signing under. When our father died, the estate landed in Sabine's lap. My name didn't appear. For her own good, the will said, as if keeping me poor was charity. I opened the command panel. Show active accounts. CipherArk 7. Data unfurled like a tide. Cold numbers. Exact. Unapologetic. $3.5 billion in liquid assets. Not just money. Leverage. Oxygen. Time. The price of dignity prepaid. My fingers hovered. Doubt tried to lift its head. Old pathetic. What if they're right? What if you're still the girl begging for crumbs? Then Sabine's voice replayed. We don't serve beggars here. I pressed enter. The room didn't tremble. No thunder. But a knot I'd carried since childhood loosened like a stitch finally coming free. I closed the laptop, felt its weight set it down, picked up my phone, tapped a single contact. Schedule an in-person appointment tomorrow, I said softly. At Sabine's branch. The scarf by the door no longer looked like a hiding place. It looked like a flag I'd been saving for the right battlefield. Morning rose bright and cruel over the bank's glass facade. I paused at the doors, not hesitating, letting the moment settle into muscle memory. A man in a gray suit held one open. Ma'am, he nodded. I smiled without offering warmth. Inside, the same marble, the same overpolished smell, except everything had shrunk. Power does that when you stop renting it from other people. The receptionist was new. Good morning, welcome to. I have an appointment, I said, drawing a black leather folio from my bag. CipherArk Holdings. Her monitor blinked red. Confusion fluttered across her face. Across the lobby, Sabine laughed with a regional client. Hair curled tighter than yesterday, makeup freshly armored. The second she saw me, her expression snapped. Storm cloud in stilettos. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, crossing the lobby like a cease and desist. I told you yesterday we're not a charity. Whatever theatrical stunt this is, end it. I didn't answer. I handed the folio to the receptionist. She scanned the QR tucked in the inner sleeve. Blinked. I'll get the manager. Sabine yanked the folio from the woman's hands. Enough. Let's see what little sister thinks she's. Her smirk derailed mid-page. Flip. Stare. Flip. Silence. For once her mouth couldn't find a script. The branch manager arrived. Silver hair, steady eyes. The kind of man trained to hold a crisis without squeezing. He took the folio from Sabine and nodded to me. "Excuse me a moment." At his terminal keys whispered, then stopped. He looked at Sabine, voice pitched low to contain the blast. "This is a VIP authorization. Primary withdrawal flag sensitive. Cipher Arc Holdings. You." He scrolled. "You're listed as an employee of a partnered entity. Did you know that?" Silence didn't just fall. It suspended as if the room forgot how gravity works. A junior banker gasped. Someone dropped a pen. Sabine paled a shade I've never seen on her. "That's not," she stammered. "That can't be real. It's forged." "It's real," I said, meeting her eyes. "You've been working for me indirectly for years." While laughing, the manager's assistant murmured something. He nodded and read. "Withdrawal authorized. Amount requested $3.5 billion confirmed. Entity signature verified. Lockdown initiated for audit compliance. Lobby closing. Security validation pending." The receptionist locked the doors. The younger associate covered her mouth like she might scream and had decided against it. Sabine's lips moved, but words refused her. Then something inside her cracked. She stumbled. She actually sank. Winter white suit folding to the marble like a prayer gone wrong. "Aurelia," she whispered, eyes wild, mascara renegade. "Don't do this. Don't ruin me. You don't understand what this will, please. I have a child. I have a career." I tilted my head. "You ruined you." My voice didn't need volume. It had evidence. "All I did was step back and let you be seen. No one intervened. Not the tellers. Not the manager. Power had changed hands and everyone felt it." "Why, you're my sister," she said, softer, like the word could conjure a hug to cover years of knives. "Am I?" I asked. The hum of overhead lights became the loudest thing in the room. Dozens of eyes watched the woman who used to parade power curl around its absence. I turned to the manager. "I'd like to speak with someone from the executive suite. Privately. This doesn't need to play out on the main floor." "Of course," he said instantly, pressing the call button. "Investor Lounge." As I passed Sabine, I didn't look down. The folio tucked itself under my arm like it belonged there, which it did. The elevator doors whispered shut, and the last thing I heard was nothing at all, the kind of silence that says the world you knew just changed its locks. I didn't even make it to the couch before my phone buzzed. The apartment door had clicked shut behind me. I was still easing out of my heels. Maris straight to voicemail. I could already hear her tone. "Tight, faux concerned, the kind you use when you want information, not intimacy." Second buzz. "Bennett." Predictable as a quarterly report. "Aurelia," he said, stretching my name like he'd practiced warmth but forgot the notes. "Evening, Bennett." I set my wine on the railing and watched the city breathe. Maris is surprised. "We saw some, movement. Transfers. Impressive. We didn't realize you were so capable." I offered, gentle as a blade. "Involved," he finished. "Just making sure everything's kosher with the trust and assets. Maris mentioned you've been investing in some private projects." "You mean the ones you both laughed about at brunch, right before she suggested I marry a balance sheet instead of building one?" Silence thickened. "Look," he tried again. "We should get together. Talk it through. Brunch this weekend." "I'm afraid my weekends are overbooked," I said softly. "Lots of pretending to be important." When he coughed, I ended the call kindly, the way you set down a glass you no longer want. I opened the laptop on the kitchen counter. My dashboard bloomed. Understated logo. Ownership tab that didn't need to shout. Controlling shareholder quietly, undeniably, me. A message pulsed in the corner. Lena. Sabine just tried to access the executive panel. I blocked her. Of course she did. Me let them wonder. On the second shelf of the bookcase, the leather folio waited. Beneath the contracts in sealed letters. A sun-faded photograph. Me at 8, hair feral, front tooth missing. Grandad Rowan kneeling beside me, holding up a rusted wrench like we'd fixed the world. I traced the crease. "You said I was the one they wouldn't see coming," I whispered. Another ping. Lena again. "They just invited you to a family dinner. Want me to accept?" I let the invitation hum in the air for a day. Then, "Yes, and let's see who actually shows up." Friday smelled like rosemary and linen at the old restaurant we used to call a treat. The hostess guided me to the back. Long table, warm pendant glow. A small placard that read reserved. For once the word didn't sting. Maris arrived first. Chanel moons on her ears, smile too polished. Someone's glowing, she purred, sinking into the chair opposite like we were two women who never learned to hurt. Bennett trailed, wearing that investor grin like a permanent tattoo. You look grounded, he said, as if it were an apology upgraded to a compliment. Sabine entered next, no smile, no greeting. Just a calculation settling behind her eyes. Finally Evelyn, our mother. Time gentled her face, not her posture. My girls, she said, as if we were still matching in lace on a church step. No one corrected her. Drinks were ordered. Maris swirled her wine. There's a calm in your eyes, she observed. Yoga? Meditation. Returns, Bennett supplied. Smart ones. I set my glass down, folded the napkin with a surgeon's attention and asked, did any of you ever wonder what happened to the Keystone Heritage Trust, Granddad's Pennsylvania Trust? The temperature shifted. Chairs tightened beneath spines. Evelyn's fingers curved harder around her teacup. That trust was dissolved years ago, Sabine said quickly. I slid a thin folder to the center. Active stamped in the corner like a heartbeat. It wasn't, I said. It was buried. I never let it die. The waiter appeared like punctuation. One bill or separate this evening? This time, I said, standing, the strap of my bag finding my shoulder. Everyone covers their own. No one moved. I crossed the room in a silence that finally knew my name. I was half a block into the evening when Sabine's voice snapped after me. More plea than steel. You're not really planning to sell it, are you? I didn't turn. The question told me everything I needed. Monday, the sky wore its serious gray. I bypassed the revolving doors for a side corridor most clients never noticed. A guard nodded, pressed his thumb to brass. A private elevator whispered open. No mirrors, no music, only breath and consequence. It delivered me to the floor where the bank kept the bones that mattered. Legacy archives, the vault office, boardrooms etched with names. In the oval boardroom, 7 chairs filled, most with careers longer than my childhood. The air held the polite chill of imminent law. This isn't a courtesy update, I began, setting a new, heavier folder on the table. This is a legal alignment. As of last Thursday, the 1954 Keystone Heritage Trust, formerly chaired by Lionel Crest, is merged into this bank's foundation. As named beneficiary, I hold majority control. No gasps. Professionals don't gasp. They assess. Then Harold Whitcomb, oldest by a decade and kind enough to make it easy, leaned forward. You've had this structured a while. 14 months, I said. A quiet smile bridged the distance between what was and what would now be. We've been waiting for someone since Crest passed, he said. 15 minutes later, heels clacked an interruption. Maris breezed in, breathless, armor in place, confusion tarred onto poise. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. From legal, I said. She hesitated, opened, read and blanched. Formal removal. Ethics clause. Retaliatory misconduct during fiduciary interaction. All documented. All signed. You can't just take everything, she whispered, eyes skittering for purchase. We're your family. Exactly, I said softly. And that's why I didn't take everything, only what you tried to erase. I faced the board. Effective immediately, we restructure under a revised family ethics charter. No mass firings. But the dynasty game ends now. Titles will match merit. Past behavior will be audited. Every community-facing fund undergoes a full integrity review. A younger director exhaled like someone finally cracked a window. The vote was unanimous. Nepotism meet exit interview. After adjournment, I wandered the adjacent hall where glass guarded old vault doors and etched brass told stories. Rowan Vale, Grandad, glinted on a plaque. Beside it, freshly cut, my name. Not vengeance, restoration. Not a throne, custody. I rode the elevator down with nothing to rehearse. That evening, rain tapped cold against my windows. I reached for a blanket and saw it. The envelope slid under my door like it had always belonged there. The handwriting on the front was surgical. Evelyn. I didn't touch it for a full minute. When someone starved you with silence, even their letters smell like razors. I opened it. Aurelia. No darling, no soft landing. Then a confession drawn in neat lines, no crossouts. She wrote about a summer when I was 10 and my lemonade stand died before its first sale. Maris accidentally knocked the jug. Evelyn had seen. She hadn't protected either of us. After Granddad died, the money thinned, and Bennett offered stability in exchange for proximity. Promotions smoothed like bribes. Control paraded as security, and she let it happen. I'm not writing for forgiveness, she finished. But I'm asking you to break the pattern. Don't become what hurt you. I sat very still. No tears. Just rain and paper. Then I dug out a small blue ledger from a childhood box, corners furred with time. Doodles of coin jars and break-evens colored in marker. Between 2 pages, a wrinkled sticky note in my own loopy hand. One day I'll have a big vault and I won't leave anyone out. Maybe I hadn't changed. Maybe I'd finally circled back to the girl before they taught me to shrink. Tomorrow I wouldn't knock on our old front door. I'd walk in, not as a daughter asking to be chosen, but as a ledger balancing itself. The wind the next morning threaded itself through the wrought iron gate like a rumor that had waited years to be said. I didn't knock. I stepped onto the old stone path the way a ledger walks into an audit, heels ticking against marble, no more tiptoeing to make myself small. From the dining hall came Sabine's voice, all curated charm. She was hosting. Extended cousins, old friends. A few investors who mistook proximity for pedigree. Crystal chimed. Laughter posed. Evelyn sat at the end of the table and pearls cinched a notch too tight. She met my gaze. She didn't look away. Well, this is unexpected, Maris said, tone frosted. I set a black folder on the edge of the buffet and smoothed my coat. If I may, I said evenly, I'd like to make a small withdrawal of the truth. Silence pulled every chair an inch higher. Maris gave that brittle laugh she uses when the floor moves under her. Aurelia, if this is some dramatic cry. No, I cut in, steady as a metronome. This is documentation, not drama. I opened the folder. First exhibit. Dad's estate trust. The original charter, equal distribution among his daughters. I laid down the page. Second, the amendment, filed 2 weeks before his stroke. Forged. I tapped the notary stamp. Compare the seal numbers. And the registrar's signature? Out of state that week. A murmur rippled. I didn't look up. Next, deeds for the Oregon vineyard. Transferred quietly into Maris's offshore shell. Timeline and routing here. Another page slid free. And the STEM endowment created in Granddad's name? Repurposed into a personal development real estate vehicle. Authorization stamped with Evelyn's signature. Maris lifted her chin. She gave permission. You don't know everything. She couldn't have. I flipped to a medical record. Date of authorization matches the day of her surgery in Zurich. She was under anesthesia. The room tilted. A cousin put his fork down midair and forgot it. I plugged in a small drive. The TV over the mantel woke to a clean scroll of transaction logs, timestamps, emails. Nothing flashy. Just truth with receipts. You always needed to be the victim, didn't you? Maris's voice cracked on the word victim. I just wanted to be seen, I told her. You wanted me erased. A chair scraped. Uncle Raymond stood, face ashen. Maris, he said quietly, the disappointment older than his bones. What have you done? Her mask faltered. She tossed a napkin like a white flag that didn't know what surrender meant. This is what she does. She digs and digs until there's nothing left to bury. But the room had shifted its gravity. 2 relatives rose and left without a word. Another shook his head. Disgraceful barely whispered. As he passed me with a hand on my shoulder that said enough. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't stop me either. She sat listening to a clock I couldn't hear. I placed one last paper on the table. A letter in Evelyn's hand to the family lawyer retracting consent to all transfers, dated 6 weeks ago. I met her eyes. She didn't look away. This house, I said, closing the folder, has 2 doors. Maris blinked. What does that? Today, I finished, turning. I walk out the one you never built. I left the folder on the marble she once called a throne and walked out into cleaner air. On the sidewalk, a young reporter waited. Not camera up, just a notebook in his hand, nervous but steady. He didn't fire a single question. "Someone wanted you heard," he said softly. "Thought you should know." 1 week later I sat on a park bench beneath an old oak, the morning humming with bees and distance. In my lap, a frayed blue savings book with my grandfather's tidy ink faded to ghost. Most pages were blank now, the deposits long moved, but tucked in the back pocket was a thin yellow slip, Rowan Vale's handwriting strong as ever. For the youngest, because she keeps the largest account where it counts. Use it when they forget who you are. I blinked hard and smiled, the quiet kind that clicks a lock back into place. I hadn't said a word to the press. I didn't have to. A clerk at Crescent, tired of watching ethics lose to optics, tipped the story to a financial justice blog with teeth. Then Mr. Holloway, Granddad's oldest friend, gave the interview I never would. Not tabloid fodder, but a ledger of character. How Rowan built the Keystone Trust because he watched a little girl get made invisible at her own table. One day, Holloway quoted him, "She'll need proof she mattered." Mark me. The interview went quietly viral. Compliance forums, legal groups, ethics boards. Threads began to unwind. Within 72 hours, the board at Crescent requested Sabine's resignation. Professional, hushed. Her license went to suspension pending review. No handcuffs. No circus. Enough. My phone rang 4 times after that. Evelyn's cell. The estate line. Then again. I didn't answer. I already knew the script. "Why did you make it public? Why couldn't you let it be?" I had let it be for too long. Across the lawn, steel and glass glinted. A modest new building with a brushed silver sign. Open Ledger Foundation. We moved in last month, but today would be my first day walking in without apology. The first scholarships go out this quarter. Women in STEM, small business grants, community credit lines written in plain English. Audits public by default. Fewer velvet ropes. More open doors. I closed the savings book and slid it into my bag. A small bird landed near my shoe. No begging, no flinch, just presence like it had done the math and found the moment solvent. I stood and headed for the glass doors. The truest withdrawal wasn't the $3.5 billion routed through a system I built with hands they called useless. It wasn't the vineyard reclaimed or the plaques newly etched. The truest withdrawal was from an account I'd been overdrafting since childhood. My silence, my name, my loyalty. I took them back with interest. Inside, the lobby smelled like fresh paint and possible. A receptionist looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Welcome," she said. "Are you here to make a deposit or a withdrawal?" "Both," I told her, and for the first time in years it felt exactly right.